The winter wind howled through the tiny village of Oakenfield, a forgotten corner of the English countryside. Amelia Hartwood pulled her threadbare shawl tighter around her slender shoulders, her pale fingers red and chapped from washing linens in the frigid stream that morning. At 23, her face still held the bloom of youth despite the hardships that had befallen her. Her golden hair, once her pride, now hung in a simple braid down her back, the only hint of its former glory. "Mistress Hartwood?" A voice called from the village path. Amelia looked up from her washing, pushing a strand of blonde hair from her face. The village messenger, a boy of no more than 12, stood nervously clutching a sealed letter. "That is I," she answered, her voice soft yet clear as the stream beside her. "A letter from Willowbrook. The magistrate sent it." The boy thrust the parchment forward before scampering away, as if proximity to her misfortune might somehow be catching. Amelia dried her hands on her skirt and broke the simple wax seal. Her blue eyes widened as she read the contents. Her grandmother, a woman she had met only twice in her life, had passed away 3 months prior. The news had taken this long to reach Amelia in her remote village. More surprising still, the old woman had left Amelia her only possession, a cottage at the edge of Willowbrook Forest, along with its contents. "An inheritance?" she whispered to the empty air. "For me?" 2 years ago, the plague had swept through Oakenfield like fire through dry grass. Within a fortnight, Amelia had lost her husband Thomas, her parents, and her infant daughter. Only her son, little Daniel, had survived, though the illness had left him weakened and quiet. At 5 years old, he seldom spoke, preferring instead to communicate through gestures and the occasional whispered word. That night, as Daniel slept on their shared straw pallet in the corner of Widow Jenkins' barn, the only shelter they had been afforded after Thomas died and their debts mounted, Amelia read the letter again by candlelight. The cottage was hers, free and clear, a place to call her own again. "Daniel," she whispered, gently rousing the boy. His eyes, blue like hers but solemn beyond their years, fluttered open. "We are going on a journey. We shall have a home again." The journey to Willowbrook took 3 days, traveling mostly by foot with occasional rides offered by kind farmers heading to market. Daniel walked bravely beside his mother, his small hand in hers, asking few questions. Their only possessions were bundled in a cloth sack, a change of clothes, a wooden cup that had belonged to Thomas, and the small knife Amelia used for cutting herbs and vegetables. When they finally arrived at the cottage, Amelia's heart sank. The small structure was in disrepair, its thatched roof partially collapsed on one side, the garden overgrown with weeds and brambles. An ancient oak tree loomed over the cottage, its massive branches scraping against what remained of the roof when the wind blew. "It is not much," she said to Daniel, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "But it shall be ours." The inside was little better. A table with 3 legs leaned against one wall. A broken chair, a rustic cauldron, and a small hearth filled with cold ashes completed the downstairs. A ladder led to a tiny loft space where Amelia found a straw mattress that smelled of must and thyme. But it was the chest that drew her attention. Positioned at the foot of the mattress, it was carved of dark wood, bound with iron bands gone rusty with age. It was locked, with no key in sight. "This must have been grandmother's," she murmured, running her fingers over the intricate carvings of leaves and vines that adorned its surface. A small engraving of a bird, a nightingale perhaps, was barely visible beneath the dust and grime of years. That night, after clearing enough space on the floor for their pallet, Amelia and Daniel huddled together beneath her shawl for warmth. The wind whispered through the gaps in the walls, and somewhere in the forest, an owl called. Daniel's breathing eventually steadied into sleep, but Amelia remained awake, staring at the chest in the moonlight that filtered through the holes in the roof. Morning brought a clear assessment of their situation. The cottage, while dilapidated, had sound bones. The well in the garden still yielded clean, sweet water, and the surrounding forest offered berries, mushrooms, and herbs that Amelia recognized from her mother's teachings. As Amelia worked to clear the garden, Daniel explored the cottage and its surroundings. By midday, she had uncovered what might once have been a vegetable plot. The soil was rich and dark beneath the weeds. Perhaps they could grow food here, she thought, if they stayed long enough. Mother, Daniel's voice, so rarely heard, made Amelia turn sharply. The boy stood in the cottage doorway, his eyes wide with excitement. Come see. Inside, Daniel led her to the hearth. He pointed at the stones that formed its base, specifically at one that protruded slightly more than the others. It moved, he whispered. Amelia knelt and examined the stone. It did indeed seem loose. With careful fingers, she wiggled it free from its mortar bed. Behind it was a small cavity, and within that cavity, a key, small, iron, and ornately crafted. The chest, Daniel said, his eyes shining. Upstairs, Amelia's hands trembled as she inserted the key into the lock of the old chest. It resisted at first, decades of disuse, making the mechanism stiff. But then came a click, and the lid creaked open on hinges gone rusty with time. Inside, wrapped in a yellowed linen cloth, lay a book bound in faded red leather. Beneath it, a wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. And at the bottom, a letter, sealed with wax imprinted with the same nightingale that was carved on the chest. Amelia opened the letter first, her heart pounding. The handwriting was spidery but elegant. My dearest granddaughter, if you are reading this, then I have passed from this world, and you have found the key I hid for safekeeping. The contents of this chest are now yours, as is the secret they contain. I was not always Margaret Hartwood, herbwoman of Willowbrook Forest. Once, I was Lady Margaret Valois, wife to Lord Edmund Valois of Thornfield Hall. The book contains my true story, and the box holds proof of your birthright. Be cautious, my child. There are those who would still see our line extinguished. Trust no one until you understand everything. With all my love. Your grandmother. Amelia sat back, stunned. Her grandmother, a lady? And what did she mean about their line being extinguished? What birthright? The sound of approaching horses interrupted her thoughts. Hastily, she closed the chest, locking it and pocketing the key. She descended the ladder just as a knock came at the door. 2 men stood outside. One was elderly, dressed in the simple but neat garments of a village official. The other was younger, perhaps 30, his clothes finer and his bearing aristocratic. His cold gray eyes assessed Amelia with undisguised interest, lingering on the gentle curve of her collarbone visible above her worn dress. Mistress Hartwood? The older man inquired. I am Master Simmons, magistrate of Willowbrook. This is Lord Liam Vanderley of Thornfield Hall. Amelia curtsied awkwardly, acutely aware of her threadbare dress and dirty hands. Good day to you, sirs. How may I be of service? We came to offer our condolences on your grandmother's passing, Lord Vanderley said, his voice smooth as honey. And to inquire about your plans for this property. My plans? Yes, Master Simmons interjected. You see, this land, while not particularly valuable, does adjoin Lord Vanderley's hunting grounds. His lordship has expressed interest in purchasing it, should you wish to sell. Amelia thought quickly. The cottage was run down, and life here would be hard, at least initially. But it was theirs, hers, and Daniel's. And now, with the mysterious contents of the chest upstairs, she felt reluctant to part with it before understanding her grandmother's message. That is most kind, she said carefully. But I have only just arrived. I would like some time to consider my options. Lord Vanderley's smile did not reach his eyes. Of course. However, I should mention that the village council has concerns about the cottage's condition. There are standards, you understand. Repairs would be costly. The threat was veiled but clear. Amelia lifted her chin slightly. I am not afraid of hard work, my lord. And I have some skill with herbs and healing. Perhaps I might make myself useful to the village, as my grandmother did. Your grandmother, Lord Vanderley said, his tones suddenly sharp, was tolerated because of her knowledge. The villagers are a superstitious lot. But times are changing, Mistress Hartwood. The old ways are dying out. Nevertheless, she replied, meeting his gaze steadily, this is my home now. I thank you for your offer, but I am not ready to sell." After they departed, with promises to return within the week, Amelia leaned against the door, her heart racing. There had been something in Lord Vanderley's manner that unsettled her, a hunger that went beyond simple land acquisition. That night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, Amelia opened the chest again. The book, she discovered, was a journal beginning some 30 years earlier. Her grandmother's neat handwriting filled its pages. Amelia began to read, and as she did, a world she had never imagined unfolded before her. Margaret had indeed been Lady Valois, married to Lord Edmund, heir to Thornfield Hall. They had one daughter, Catherine, Amelia's mother. But Edmund's younger brother, Richard, had coveted both his brother's title and his wife. When Edmund died suddenly of a fever, Richard had moved quickly to seize control of the estate. Margaret, suspecting poison and fearing for her life and that of her daughter, had fled with Catherine, then only 2 years old. They had taken refuge in Willowbrook Forest, in this very cottage, which had belonged to the old herb woman who had once served Thornfield Hall. Margaret had apprenticed herself to the woman, learning the healing arts and eventually taking her place when she died. She had hidden her true identity, taking the name Hartwood from the forest that had sheltered them. Catherine had grown up knowing nothing of her heritage. At 18, she had fallen in love with a farmer's son from Oakenfield and left Willowbrook to marry him, Amelia's father. Margaret had kept her secret, visiting her granddaughter only twice, when Amelia was too young to remember. But the most shocking revelation came near the end of the journal. Richard is dead these 10 years, but his son Lucas now holds the title. He is cut from the same cloth as his father, cruel, grasping, and dangerous. Catherine's children, should any survive, are the true heirs to Thornfield. The proof is in the pearl box, along with Edmund's signet ring and the family records. I have kept them safe all these years, waiting for the right time to reveal the truth. But I am old now, and my time grows short. If you are reading this, my dear granddaughter, know that you are the last of our line. The blood of the Valois runs in your veins. Thornfield is rightfully yours or your child's. Amelia's hands trembled as she opened the wooden box. Inside lay a heavy gold ring bearing a coat of arms, a nightingale perched on an oak branch. Beside it were yellowed documents, a marriage certificate between Edmund Valois and Margaret Harlow, a birth record for Catherine Valois, and a deed to Thornfield Hall naming Edmund's heirs in perpetuity. Lucas Vanderley, Amelia whispered. Lord Liam Vanderley's father. The current lord must be Liam's elder brother, or Liam himself, if his brother had died without issue. The following days passed in a blur of activity. Amelia worked from dawn until dusk, repairing what she could of the cottage, clearing the garden, and gathering herbs from the forest. Daniel seemed to thrive in their new home, exploring the woods and bringing back interesting finds, oddly shaped stones, colorful feathers, and once, a rabbit caught in a snare that provided them with their first proper meat in weeks. But it was the old well at the edge of the property that captivated Daniel most. Amelia had forbidden him to go near it alone, fearing he might fall in. But she often caught him sitting beside it, peering down into its depths or dropping pebbles to hear the distant splash. A week after their arrival, Amelia was hanging herbs to dry from the cottage rafters when Daniel burst through the door. "Mother!" "The well," he cried, tugging at her skirt. "There is something down there." Reluctantly, Amelia followed him outside. The old well, its stone sides covered in moss, stood at the forest's edge. Daniel pointed excitedly. "I saw it shine when the sun hit it," he explained. "Something metal." Amelia peered down, but could see only darkness. "It is probably just a bucket that fell in long ago," she said. But Daniel was insistent. That night, as Amelia read more of her grandmother's journal by candlelight, she came across an entry that made her breath catch. "I have hidden the Valois jewels where no one would think to look, in the place most avoid yet most depend upon. Water gives life, but it also conceals that which must remain unseen until the rightful heir returns." The well. The jewels were in the well. The next morning, Amelia fashioned a crude hook from an old iron pot handle and attached it to a length of rope. With Daniel watching eagerly, she lowered it into the well, trying to snag whatever might be hidden beneath the water's surface. After several attempts, she felt resistance. Carefully, she pulled upward. The rope grew heavier, and then, breaking the surface of the water, came a small iron chest, similar to the one in the loft but small enough to fit in her hands. This chest had no lock. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had kept them dry despite their watery hiding place, were jewels that took Amelia's breath away: diamonds, emeralds, rubies, and sapphires set in gold necklaces, bracelets, and rings. A fortune beyond anything she had ever imagined. "Pretty," Daniel whispered, reaching out to touch a sapphire the size of a robin's egg. That afternoon, as they sat at their rickety table sharing a simple meal of bread and stewed rabbit, hoofbeats approached the cottage. Amelia quickly hid the jewel box beneath a loose floorboard she had discovered days earlier. Lord Vanderlei had returned, this time alone. He stood framed in the doorway, his tall figure blocking the light. His eyes, cold as winter, moved from Amelia to Daniel and back again. "You have been busy, I see," he said, noting the improvements to the cottage. "But I fear your efforts are wasted. The village council has determined that this structure is unsafe and must be condemned." Amelia's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "On what grounds, my lord?" "I have repaired the roof and walls. The cottage is sound." "The decision has been made," he said flatly. "You have until the new moon, 3 days hence, to vacate." After he left, Amelia sank onto the single chair, her mind racing. This was no coincidence. Somehow Lord Vanderlei suspected, or knew, who she was. The pressure to leave, the sudden condemnation of the cottage. He wanted them gone before they discovered the truth. But it was too late for that. Amelia already knew who she was, who Daniel was. The true heir to Thornfield Hall. That night, as Daniel slept, Amelia made a decision. They would leave, but not to disappear as her grandmother and mother had done. They would seek justice. The next morning, Amelia dressed in her cleanest dress, which still showed signs of wear at the cuffs and hem. She braided her blonde hair neatly and packed a small bundle containing the journal, the pearl box with its documents, and a few of the smaller jewels she could conceal easily. "We are going on another journey," she told Daniel, who watched her with solemn eyes. "To a big house where we shall meet important people." They set off toward Thornfield Hall, following directions Amelia had gleaned from villagers during her herb-gathering expeditions. The great house stood on a hill, surrounded by formal gardens and ancient oaks. As they approached, Amelia felt a strange sense of homecoming, as if the very stones recognized her blood. At the servants' entrance, she asked for the housekeeper, claiming to have information about medicinal herbs for the still room. Once inside the vast kitchen, she revealed her true purpose. "I must speak with Lady Vanderlei," she said firmly. "It concerns a matter of great importance to this household." The housekeeper, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Porter, looked skeptical but was swayed by Amelia's quiet dignity and perhaps by the quality of the sapphire ring Amelia now wore, too valuable to be in the possession of a simple herb-woman. Lady Vanderlei received them in a small morning room overlooking the gardens. She was a fragile-looking woman with kind eyes and graying hair, clearly many years older than her husband. Daniel clung to Amelia's skirt, overwhelmed by the grandeur surrounding them. "Mrs. Porter says you have urgent business with me," Lady Vanderlei said, her voice gentle but curious. "I confess I do not recognize you, though there is something familiar in your face." "My name is Amelia Hartwood," Amelia began, and then, taking a deep breath, added, "though by rights, I should be called Amelia Valois. My grandmother was Lady Margaret Valois, wife to Lord Edmund. My mother was Catherine, their only child." Lady Vanderlei's face drained of color. "Margaret? But she died, years ago, in a fire." "No, my lady. She escaped with my mother. They lived in hiding in Willowbrook Forest. My grandmother died only months ago, leaving me her cottage and the truth of my heritage." Amelia produced the journal, the documents, and finally, Edmund's signet ring. Lady Vanderlei's hands trembled as she examined them. I knew it, she whispered. I always knew Richard's story did not ring true. But Liam is not the rightful lord, Amelia finished quietly. By the laws of inheritance, that title belongs to my son, Daniel, as the last male descendant of Lord Edmund. Lady Vanderley looked at Daniel, who met her gaze with the same blue eyes that had belonged to his great-grandfather. He has the Valois look, she murmured. The same eyes as in the portrait of Edmund in the gallery. A noise at the door made them both turn. Lord Vanderley stood there, his face livid. What is this? He demanded. What are you doing in my house? It is not your house, Lady Vanderley said, rising to her feet with unexpected strength. It never was. This child is the rightful heir to Thornfield, and I think you have known it all along. The confrontation that followed was bitter and brief. Lord Vanderley denied everything, called Amelia an impostor and a thief, and ordered them removed from the property. But Lady Vanderley stood firm. The magistrate will decide this matter, she declared. And he shall see all the evidence, including this journal, which details how your father poisoned his own brother to steal his title and lands. In the end, it was the jewels that proved most convincing to the authorities. The Valois jewels were well documented in the county records, having been thought lost in the fire that supposedly claimed Lady Margaret's life. Their existence, along with the family documents and ring, provided irrefutable proof of Amelia's claims. The truth, once revealed, spread through the county like wildfire. Lord Vanderley fled in the night, taking what valuables he could carry. He was later apprehended trying to book passage to France and was returned to face justice for his father's crimes and his own attempts to defraud the rightful heir. By spring, Amelia and Daniel had taken up residence at Thornfield Hall. Lady Vanderley, who had been ignorant of her husband's deception, chose to remain, becoming a grandmother figure to Daniel and a friend to Amelia. The old cottage in Willowbrook Forest was not abandoned but was instead renovated and maintained as a reminder of their humble beginnings and the courage of the women who had preserved their heritage. Daniel, now 6, began his education as befitted the future Lord Valois. Amelia, honoring her grandmother's legacy, established an herb garden at Thornfield and continued to provide remedies for the villagers who sought her help. Sometimes, in the quiet evenings when Daniel was asleep and the great house settled into peaceful silence, Amelia would take out her grandmother's journal and read from it. The words connected her to the past, to the women who had sacrificed and endured to protect what was rightfully theirs. The chest that had started it all, the ancient, carved chest with its iron bands and nightingale emblem, was given a place of honor in the main hall of Thornfield. Inside it, Amelia kept the journal, the documents, and a portrait she had commissioned of her grandmother, mother, herself, and Daniel, 4 generations of the Valois family, unbroken despite all attempts to erase them from history. And on the rare occasions when doubt or fear crept into her heart, Amelia would remind herself of the day she had opened that chest for the first time, how it had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning, how a simple inheritance, appearing worthless to the casual eye, had contained a legacy beyond price. How the truth, long buried, had finally emerged into the light, changing everything forever.